Root rot is one of the most common causes of death of houseplants, and a lot of YouTube videos will talk about how to deal with root rot, but not many of them will talk about how to prevent it from happening. So in this video, we are going to talk about what causes root rot. I'm going to give you 7 tips that you can apply to your houseplants so that you don't have to deal with root rot ever again. Hi everyone, this is Jera from Plant Corner, and I'm a plant killer turned a plant store owner. I now help plant parents in New York keep their plants alive and thrive in their subpar city environment. I was going to make a video on how to deal with root rot, and then found out that I do not have any plants that have root rot at the moment. And to be honest, I haven't had that problem in quite some time. So I reflect on some things I've been doing on a regular basis and concluded 7 different things that you could do to your plants to prevent root rot from happening. Before we get to that, we need to first know what causes root rot. And I would say there are 3 factors that are involved in this. First is the host, or in this case, we're referring to plants. The environment, which in this case, we are referring to the soil or the substrate that the plants are in. And then the pathogen, which is either the harmful bacteria or fungi that cause the rot. Now, it can happen in a few different ways. So first, if the root is suffocated, which means that you water the plant too much and there's no oxygen in the soil, then the root can rot. Another situation that could happen is that if you repot the plant and you accidentally damage the roots, now the harmful bacteria and fungi can go into the roots, and that could also cause the plant to rot. Another reason why the plant could get root rot is from underwatering. So if you don't water the plant for a long period of time, the root will start to dry up because the plant is utilizing the food and the water that the root has been storing to keep them alive. Now that root that dried up will no longer absorb water. So when you water the plant again, now the water has nowhere to go, and that also will suffocate the roots and also create the environment that's bacteria and fungi can thrive, which is the environment without oxygen. So when you water again, now your plant's not absorbing that water, and now you got root rot. So to sum up, root rot can happen from the lack of oxygen in the soil, the infection from bacteria or fungi, or underwatering. And now let's get into what you can do to prevent root rot. The first thing you can do is to make sure that all your plants get sufficient amount of light, because that's the only way they can utilize the water that you give them when you water the plants. And remember that the amount of water you give them depends on the amount of light they get. If they do get a lot of light, then it makes sense to completely saturate the pot when you water. However, if the plant doesn't get a lot of light, it makes more sense to actually use a moisture meter to gauge how much water is still in the soil and then water accordingly. Don't try to saturate everything everywhere all the time. Another thing you can do is using a well-draining substrate. Now, plants that come from a greenhouse usually are planted in a moisture-retaining substrate, because in the greenhouse they get a lot of light, a lot of fertilizer, and they can't water all the plants every day. So they use the moisture-retaining substrate in order for them to not having to water the plants all the time. Now, when you bring it home though, we obviously do not get as much sunlight as the greenhouse, where you get sunlight from 360 degrees direction. But when you when the plants come to your home, now we have 3 sides that's blocked off by the wall, the ceiling, so your plants get significantly less light when you bring them home. So one way for you to not overwater the plant is to move the plant into a well-draining substrate after the plant has somewhat adjusted to your environment. So that means you're going to add bark, pumice, perlite, or charcoal into the soil and make sure the soil is very well draining and chunky. That way, when you water the plants, there's still room for oxygen to flow through. Next, I really highly recommend using clear pots with a lot of drainage holes for your plants. That way you could see exactly what is going on with the roots, with the soil, see if the soil is completely dry before you water, see if you have been watering thoroughly or were you just watering one side of the pot. And all of this is just make it so much easier for new plant parents to figure out when and how much to water. Next, you want to make sure you're watering the plant just the right amount and not too much or not too little, because too much water can actually suffocate the plants and cause them to get root rot, and too little water can cause the root to dry out and now you get dry rot. So how do we do that? You would want to measure the moisture level in the soil before you water every time, either by lifting the pot. If you have a plant in a plastic pot, you can lift them to feel how heavy or light it is. You can stick your finger in, don't just touch the top, stick your finger deep into the soil if your pot is short enough for you to stick your finger in. You can wait for the plants to show you some signs that they're ready to be watered. So some plants like peace lily or Fittonia or pothos, the leaves will droop slightly, and that's when you know the plant is ready to be watered. You could also use a moisture meter, stick it, and if you have a really big pot, you want to make sure you stick the moisture meter into a various spot of the pot to make sure that the soil gets to dry out in those spots before you water the plant. And remember, one important thing is to be consistent. You want to set a schedule in order to check the soil once a week or twice a week to make sure that you're not letting some plants dry out for too long. Another important thing is to make sure that your room has some kind of airflow going on. So that can come from a fan, installing a fan and have it on most part of the day, or you could open the window, that way the fresh air can come in and circulate in your room. That way there's less chance of fungal infection. Now, if your plant has been in the same pot for a long time, you also should be aerating the soil by sticking like a little stick into the soil and twist it a little bit. That way when you water the plant, the water and the air can seep through and the roots can get oxygen that it needs. Otherwise, if the soil is too compacted, the root can also get suffocated easily. Another thing that I use every couple weeks or so is the fungicide from Arbor. So this fungicide has beneficial bacteria that when you mix it with water and either like you spray on the leaves or water it onto the roots of your plants, it helps eliminate fungi spores, so that stops any fungal infection from spreading. So I tend to use this as a preventative method for all my plants every couple of weeks. You could also use a hydrogen peroxide mixture. Mix 1 part hydrogen peroxide and 4 parts water. Use that to water your plants. That will also help kill bacteria or fungi, but be mindful that it could also accidentally kill the beneficial bacteria and fungi as well. Lastly, I would recommend that you buy plants from reputable and reliable sources. I personally have had bad experience with supermarket plants and big box store before because they didn't take care of the plants very well and the plant came to me with root rot. So I would buy plants from growers or stores that know what they're doing. That way you don't have to deal with this problem in the first place. So a quick run through of what we've talked about today. You want to make sure that you're giving the plants a good amount of light so that you can utilize the water. You want to make sure you're using the well-draining substrate and that you use clear pot with lots of drainage holes so you can see what's going on in there. You want to water just the right amount and not too much and not too little. You want to generate airflow in your space and make sure to aerate the soil if needed. You want to use fungicide as a preventative, and you want to purchase your plants from a reliable source. If you find the 7 tips helpful, don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button. We have a lot more contents coming up and I can't wait to share it with you. Thank you so much for being with me and watching this video today. I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful day and may your plants never get root rot. Bye!